Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Alan Smason, and again, I want to welcome you to NOLA Theater Talk. This is an ongoing weekly series of broadcasts we have on Mondays and Fridays. This past Monday, of course, we were not on due to Yom Kippur, the Jewish holiday, the Day of Atonement. So I was atoning for my sins. Those of you out there who were not, God will get you. So anyway, long and short is that we are on tonight. We have a very exciting show I want to talk about. I'm very enthusiastically looking forward to talking to two of the members of a very important play, which you'll be able to see on theatercriticism.com's Facebook page tomorrow, but I don't want to get ahead of myself. I would also let you know that we are going to be part of some discussion about this particular play coming up, and we encourage you, if you have any questions or any comments, to go to StreamYard.com and put in the /Facebook into that. That'll allow you to add your 2 cents, as it were, and to comment so that we know who you are. A lot of times we'll see Facebook user, or we'll say something like user on there, but it won't exactly have who you are. And a lot of times people want to say, hey, how you doing, Alan, or whoever. And anyway, we would like to offer you that opportunity. If we know who the statement is coming from, it makes it that much more meaningful. So just keep that in mind. Again, NOLA Theater Talk is where you are. We broadcast weekly to the NOLA Theater Folk Facebook group, as well as to the theatercriticism.com Facebook page. Again, not the website, because the website is separate. This is the support page on Facebook. And we also broadcast to my YouTube channel, and you can look it up either by my own name or by the name that we had originally created that account under. So tonight, I wanted to tell you a little bit about what we're going to be dealing with, and basically, I wanted everybody to know who was coming into the room. We're going to be taking part in a broadcast tomorrow, as I mentioned, starting at 2 o'clock, of a play called Black and Bue. Now, Black and Bue, as you can see, there's a lady who's a female police officer who's on that, and that particular person is Yvonne Blayde. Yvonne, sadly, passed in August, but when she retired, having had a stellar career on the New Orleans Police Department, she retired as a deputy chief under Chief Warren Woodfork's administration. He was superintendent, she was deputy superintendent. So again, the story of her life is what Black and Bue is based upon. And this is based on a series of interviews that were conducted, and we'll get into that, by Matthew Schwartzman, who served as the producer for this particular play when it was first aired on the Samuel Dubois Cook stage at Dillard University back in January of 2018. And we'll talk a little bit about the success of that particular piece as well. But let me go ahead and explain that the person who was picked to do this particular play was commissioned to do it. Matt felt like he was able to do the interviews and get all the storyline together, but they wanted somebody to bring this to fruition and to sort of base the story on the life of Yvonne Blayde, but not necessarily exactly her life. And again, we'll get into that. But the person who was commissioned to do that was Ariadne Blayde. And I'm going to ask her to come in right now. Ariadne, welcome to our show.
Hi. Hello. Thank you so much for having me.
You are the playwright for Black and Bue. And
yes, I am.
Again, this was 2018 when I saw it presented, but I assume that there must have been some time before it got presented that you actually had written it. 2017? How long did it take you?
Yeah, so I was commissioned by Matt Schwarzman and the Yvonne Blayde project in spring 2016, which was very exciting. They put out a call for proposals, and I threw my name in the hat, and they decided that I would be the best fit for the project, which was just so humbling, and of course it was a huge honor. And so then I spent basically the rest of that year, 2016, well into 2017, collecting research. So I did a series of interviews with Yvonne herself. I interviewed her family members. I spoke to a lot of other people who have been involved in policing here in New Orleans, both people who were officers themselves, and I also spoke to the Independent Police Monitor, talked to various nonprofits, read a lot of books, about New Orleans at that time, sort of the politics of what was going on in town at that time. So it really was a fairly long process, probably almost a year of research, and then a good 6 months to a year of writing the play, and of course workshopping the early drafts of the play.
And sort of similar to what goes on in the musical Grey Gardens, you had actually a person who took on the role of the lady who is essentially playing the inspirational person who's a fictitious name that you've come up with is Anne Broussard, right? And
that's right.
The person playing Anne Broussard, younger, and then in the latter part of the play, the second act, as it were, you've got one of our esteemed actresses that we all love and know so well, Carol Sutton, taking on the role as an older, seasoned police veteran. But
that's right.
To take on that early role of the young police recruit who's actually fighting a lot of things, fighting the fact that she's a woman, the fact that she's a person of color, and then having to fight the fact that she, may have had a family that she was trying to raise. All of these things, became a bit of a problem for her, and she had to kind of fight her way, through all of that, and essentially at the end of it all, rose to deputy chief. That's just a fantastic story. You can't create these kind of stories and make them up. Truth is stranger than fiction in many cases. So Ariadne, I want to bring in our second person tonight who we're going to talk about. And this is the lady who actually played the role of Anne Broussard, the younger. And as I mentioned, Carol Sutton played the older. So let me bring in Cherelle Palmer. And Cherelle, there you are. How are you? Welcome to NOLA Theater Talk. Can you hear me okay? Well, there you go. I think she's frozen. That's okay. We'll just wait till you catch up, Cherelle. I tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to go ahead and kick you, and I'm going to ask you to come back if you can hear me. Sometimes these things work where you kick the guest out, they come back in, and then they're fantastic. While we're waiting for her to come back in, let me ask you quickly. I'm having a Manhattan tonight, and you're having what?
So I'm just having some bourbon with a little bit of simple syrup and lemon juice. It's just the simplest thing, but it's so tasty.
You have no name for that, huh?
No, I don't know if it has a name. It must.
Bourbon and lemon juice and
simple syrup.
And simple syrup.
Yeah.
No, I'm not quite sure. Lemon juice and bourbon. That's sort of like almost like an Arnold Palmer, but not quite.
Sort of. Yeah, it's I guess kind of a take on an old fashioned maybe without the muddled fruit.
Yeah. In any event, we'll wait for Cherelle to come back in because for some reason, I don't know why, but a lot of times that's what happens. And you have to kick them out and they come back in. It's sort of like the machines have to be woken up or something. I'm not quite
right.
Sure. Let me get back to Black and Bue. Now Matt did all of these interviews. We were talking about his being more or less the producer, and I know that Troy Poplis had served as director.
Yes.
Now, did Matt actually serve as producer, and he picked Troy to be the director, or how did that work?
I would say it was a team effort. After I was commissioned as playwright, I certainly wasn't, serving in a producing role the same way Matt was, but it was a very collaborative effort, very team-based. And I think Matt and I and some of the other folks who were involved from early on in the project decided that Troy would be an excellent fit as director.
So Cheryl's almost on her way back in. I can see she's trying her best. So hopefully there she is. Welcome back, Cherelle. We got you, I think. We hope, yes. There you are. Okay. Now, you're communicating on your iPad tonight, right?
Yes.
Okay. So we're I think you have a little bit of latency, a little lag between the time I ask a question, you hear it and are able to answer it. So we may have to wait for your answers a little bit more than just the normal ones, but that's okay. So we had a little problem earlier today. We were doing the testing, and you were upside down, right side forwards, etc. We finally got that together. But I wanted you to know, Ariadne and Cherelle, in both of your honors, I have worn my special tie for tonight. Now, you got to look at it real quick. I don't know if you can see it.
I can't see it. What does it say?
It says
The
The
Rolling
Rolling Stones,
Stones.
Black
Black
and
and Blue.
Blue. So I got that for you.
Oh, that's
They had
great.
an album called Black and Blue. So
Oh yeah, of
and,
course.
and I should point out, Yvonne married into the Bechet family, which is so famous because of Sidney Bechet, who was a clarinetist, many people would say, but he was really more a soprano saxophonist. And he was noted for playing the soprano saxophone as well as the clarinet, but one of the great innovators in jazz. And Sidney Bechet, established himself as quite a formidable force. And one of the songs he wrote was a song called Black and Blue.
Black and Blue.
So what a perfect. Now, did you come up with that title, or was it working for you already?
No, I came up with that title. It just seems like the most obvious thing in the world, honestly.
You know, it's just perfect. So, did you know about Black and Blue? Did you know about Sidney Bechet's music before?
Yes, I definitely had heard Sidney Bechet's music before, but it wasn't until after I chose that title that I heard the song, which
Oh,
is
okay.
kind of
So,
cool.
so
Yeah,
you chose the title and then the song. You know,
yeah,
that's
yeah,
interesting.
pretty neat.
That kind of happened in. I don't know if you ever remember the musical 1776, but in the musical 1776, they had a poster of this eaglet being laid, if you will, by the eagle, and the eagle was the old United Kingdom, the Union Jack, etc., and the little colonies were being, broken out of the shell, etc. And they actually saw that poster before they wrote the song, when
Oh
they talk
wow,
about the eaglet being laid, etc. It's interesting that poster, came before the actual song. You would think the song came first and then they did the poster. Exact
right.
opposite. Cheryl, tell me how you got involved in the project. Again, one of my favorite pictures, and I want to go back if I can and show some of the early scenes that we had here. But this is one of the pictures that I took, and I've got many more to put in as well. But this picture has if you notice in the upper left-hand corner there, the late Frederick Mead. He was part of this project, and there you are, Cheryl, right next to Zeb Hollins III, right? And then right next to you is your inspiration, of course, Yvonne Bechet herself, and next to her is Carol Sutton, and then on top there is Matt Story and a couple of other people involved with the project.
That's Miley Zox
Miley
and Rodney, and then we have Niles
okay, all the way on
over. Yeah, who played the son, the little boy.
So again, that was part of what I was talking about. As it becomes evident later on, the story of having to deal with having a family became an impediment to being somebody who's trying to have a career on the NOPD. Cheryl, again, you did this back in 2018. How did they approach you? How did it happen that you were able to be a part of this project?
A complete audition process. Troy Pappas is one of my mentors from high school. He introduced me into acting. He introduced me into theater, into musical theater, which is how I wound up studying acting at Dillard University. And we became knit tight. We traveled to Paris together. We were featured on Night Only together, me amongst a lot of my theater brothers and sisters. And he knows how passionate I am about original work, especially original work produced here, never seen before, and about one of New Orleans' most famous moguls in the city ever, in history. It became evident to me that even if I didn't get the call back or getting the audition, because we all know how that process is, especially in the theater world, it's not always guaranteed, right? But through the research, I did a lot of research about Miss Yvonne before even seeing her, before even shaking hand. And I was immediately inspired by the story, and I was able to, in the moment, of course, in the audition room and especially on the stage, create moments that were real and felt very connected to me. And I took those scenes and that experience, that opportunity personally. And I got the call back. I was cast, and I did not take any of that lightly. I began immediately to work. because it was just that important to me. And I just knew I had to meet this woman, knowing that she was going to be available to come to the show. I had to be a part in any way, even if I was backstage working. I was going to be a part of this project.
Now, are you from New Orleans originally?
Yes.
Okay, so it meant more to you also because of the fact that she was a real true female pioneer in terms of
Absolutely.
being part of the New Orleans Police Department at an early age. Now, how long does your character stay on stage? In other words, what's the earliest you are depicted in Ariadne's play, and when do you hand the role off to Carol? At what age?
I would say you're seeing a much younger version of Anne, who is directly inspired by Yvonne Bechet.
Right.
You see her in an aspect of her life, which are some of the differences as well, which I wanted to point out. You only see one son. You get to see her family aspect. You get to see who she grew up with, who helped raise her, which is Aunt Theo, played by the Carol Sutton. You get to see the relationship, as well as the relationship early on, her walking immediately into the office and demanding to be put on the job. You know, something never seen before, let alone from a woman, let alone from a Black woman that wants to be on the force. Who just, pamphlet came in the mail and I'm here. It was very forward, without it being forceful. And that is the connection between Miss Yvonne and Anne Broussard, the character.
Right. In the second part of the act there, you play another character, Patricia Green, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, now explain what that role is.
Now, Patricia Green is much more of an updated character. I find that people in the audience nowadays would relate more to her character. They can, based on what's happening widespread racially and socially in America right now, there's a lot more of an impact with Patricia being a mother trying to raise a son who is constantly in and out of trouble and within the community, and not to be seen with police officers and having clash. There's still that existent clash, even though we've kind of been lenient upon it. But now, due to what has been brought back up, or what has been paid attention to now, what has been upon, we still can make that distinctive relation to Patricia more, because we can understand and we can see it happening on a regular basis. The fear of Black mothers losing their sons, the fear of seeing a police officer at your door. You see a lot of moments brought to the surface that most of the audience don't see on a regular basis and don't get to experience, but to see that in a current status, even 2020 now, to see that reflection is still relatable, especially for me, because I'm very young. I consider myself very young. To be able to take on this part, it's a higher level of understanding, but it's that same connection to what Patricia felt for her son, the fear she felt as a Black mother, trying to take care of her son and take care of her husband and work overtime and keep up. And it's also reflected in Anne Broussard, keeping up with her son, making sure he goes to school. But eventually you see more of Anne stepping into her career. And Patricia is battling the loss of her son, the possible loss of her son.
Alan, if you don't mind, Cherelle has done a great job bringing those two characters to light. And I feel like people may be curious at this time about sort of the time span of the play. And, Yvonne Bechet had a career that spanned many decades, right? So she joined the force in, I believe, 1968, and she didn't retire until the 90s, right? And in that time, she worked her way up from being a rookie in the department to actually being deputy chief, which is a big deal. She was the first Black woman who had really gotten to that level. And so when we were talking about, how to design the play, we thought that it was really important basically to show the early part of her career as well as the later part of her career, right? So seeing her in the 60s when sexism and racism were just so overt in every workplace, and watching her sort of struggle through that and try to break through those barriers. And, you know, manage being a mother and manage being on the force and manage being Black and being a woman and putting up with all this prejudice. We wanted to show that, obviously, because that was such an important part of who Yvonne was. But we also wanted to fast forward into, you know, the more recent time, when she was higher up in the force and she was in more of a position of power, you know, moving closer to the present day. So actually the first act of the play, Black and Bue, is set in the 60s, the late 60s. And the second act is actually set in the early 2000s. So you've heard Cherelle talk about, you know, playing younger Anne, and then you mentioned Carol Sutton plays older Anne.
Right.
So we're really seeing her at the beginning of the year and also kind of at the end of her career as well.
And of course, Carol plays Aunt Theo, as Cherelle said.
Yeah, exactly.
So she gets to play that older part of the aunt first, and then she plays the older Anne.
Yeah, and one of the things that I'm actually really proud of in the play, I think it was really smart how I designed it, is that I believe there are 8 actors, right? And in each act, it's a totally different story, and each of the actors plays a different character. So in the first act, for example, Cherelle's character is younger Anne, right, based on Yvonne Blayde, and in the second act, she's a mother. She's a working class mother who is worried for the safety of her child because her child is having these run-ins with the police, right? And in the second act, Carol Sutton plays older Anne, and in the first act, she plays the woman basically who raised Anne, so it's kind of cool. So each of the actors gets an opportunity to really show their range because most of them are playing someone completely different in the second act than who they play in the first act. So that's kind of cool. I've always been proud of like sort of the symmetry of that.
Because we weren't able to welcome you in the right we should have when you had to kick you out, Cherelle, what are you having tonight while I enjoy my Manhattan? What are you having?
Oh, this is just sparkling black raspberry water because I'm being good and I've had coffee all day. So I need to,
that's all right. So
need to hydrate.
Did you all have a rehearsal earlier today? Because I know it's going to be tomorrow and it's live, and you know, you don't have any way of redoing it. You know, once you open up that gate, you know, you got to go on, and the show must go on. So how many rehearsals have you had over the course of the last several weeks?
I think we've only had 3 rehearsals, but
we've had 3.
I have to tell you, in that time span, it's been a real jump back to 2018, especially for me.
Well, again, you know, it's just your muscles. You probably, you know, are just learning to reflex the old muscles that you had because you had that roll down beforehand, and of course that's great.
Right.
That you're able to do that. If it was just brand new and you were trying to form those characters, it probably would require a whole lot more than that. Ariadne, have you been involved in watching them as they do it, or are you just taking a seat on the sidelines?
So I've been very involved in the reading from a production angle. So, you know, doing the fundraising and the promotion and the graphic design, there's actually been a ton that's gone into that with partnering with HowlRound. So that's really the aspect that I've been taking. I'm actually a tour guide. My job is at night. I give tours for haunted history tours. So I haven't been able to be at most of the rehearsals, but I'm the type of playwright who likes to give the director and the actors some breathing room anyway, you know, so I think it's worked out fine. It's given Troy an opportunity to really, you know, connect closely with the actors without, you know, feeling like I'm breathing down their neck and all that, which sometimes, you know, can be an issue with new plays and new playwrights.
Well, I noticed how you got a plug in for my cousin, Sydney Smith, in Haunted.
Yes, I just learned today that y'all are related. That's so funny. It's such a small world.
Well, you know, I'd like to think that I'm the person that we compete with one another in a way. You know, he's got his haunted history tours, and I've got NOLA Theater Talk. So there you go.
I mean, giving ghost tours, it's about as close to theater as you can get. I mean, it's like a nightly one-woman show basically that I put on when I'm out there giving my ghost tours. So
well, it sounds fantastic, and again, I can imagine somebody who's a playwright would have a good way to introduce all of the different characters, etc. Cherelle, I have to ask, you know, in terms of in 2018 when you first did this, how many shows do you recall that they had? It wasn't that many weekends. Was it 2 or 3 weekends? Do you remember?
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, how many weekends was it originally done? I was trying to. Was it 3 weekends or 4 when you did the show? Okay, well, I guess
Yeah.
I was just trying to. I was trying to
know,
understand because it's a smaller
I mean,
auditorium. If you, yeah,
I think it was a short run. I think it was only maybe 3 weekends,
yeah,
maybe 2 weekends. It was short.
it really,
yeah. I didn't get to hear about it until later, and I apologize that I came on the last day, but thank God I did because I got to take all those wonderful pictures and I wanted to sort of go back with that as well because not only did I get the picture we already showed, which is that cast recording, basically I had another picture, and this one, Cheryl, you sitting down, Cheryl? Check that one out.
yes.
Oh, I love that.
Now,
That's
now,
wonderful.
now that of course is Yvonne in the middle, Carol on her right or our left, and then Cheryl on Yvonne's left or our right. And so there's the two Anne Broussards and Yvonne Bechet in the center. And I was so delighted to be able to take those pictures. You never know when they're going to work for you, when they're not. And then after the show, I
Right.
believe Carol actually conducted a talk back, or at least the cast. It looks to me like Carol was leading the day there in the center. But again, I see the whole cast on the. You said there were 7 people in the cast.
I think
Is that right?
8. I think 8.
Because they're 8 on stage.
Yeah, there's 8.
All of them are on stage.
Yep.
So
Yeah, we did a talk back actually, I believe after every performance. Right, Cheryl? Do you remember that?
Yeah, we try to do one after every performance.
Every
and that
night.
was
after
one of the
everyone.
first
Okay,
ones.
so that wasn't a special one. Okay, well,
And if I could just say,
Yeah.
I just like to say that we actually the play itself, when we produced it, was only 90 minutes because we wanted to have that extra half hour for the talk back. And actually for the reading tomorrow, we're using a slightly expanded version of the script. So we're using the 2-hour version of the script that was actually an earlier draft. Because now we don't have to save that extra time for the talk back. So anyone who saw the play in 2018 and who comes to the reading tomorrow or watches it later, you'll actually be seeing a slightly longer and, in my opinion, better version of the script.
Well, now explain to me how you got involved with this. HowlRoundCommons.com. What is their interest in this particular play? They mount shows. They produce shows.
Yeah, HowlRound has a ton of really cool content in sort of the whole theater sphere. A lot of really interesting, diverse, progressive work. Everything I've seen that they've put up has been really cool and just right on target in terms of sort of the issues that matter today. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention the wonderful Lisa D'Amour, who it was honestly, she's a wonderful playwright. I'm sure you know who she is. Really, really talented person. And she, I guess, saw this production back in 2018 and was reminded of it, back in the spring when George Floyd was murdered and when all the protests began. And it was really her idea to resurrect it. So she got in touch with Matt and got in touch with me. And she's been really a driving force in producing this new version of the reading. And she set everything up with HowlRound. So we really wouldn't be here today, and we wouldn't be doing the reading tomorrow without Lisa D'Amour. So
Yes, no, and actually, Lisa was responsible for bringing back one of her earlier pieces, Nita and Zeta, which is still online. For those of you who haven't seen it,
I'll have to watch it. Yeah, I love her work.
And if you haven't seen that particular show, it had a lot of acrobatics that was involved with the 2 characters. And so in order to be able to bring that onto a small virtual screen, they had to actually take some of the 2005 performance that had been videotaped and incorporate that into the virtual process.
Oh, that's
and of course,
neat.
Sean LaRocca, who works with Kathy Randall's production company. I believe Kathy was involved, with Nita and Zeta, but I don't know that she was involved with this. But Kathy's husband Sean actually did the sound on Nita and Zeta, and Kathy was one of the stars. She played Nita, I guess it was, and Katie Pearl played Zeta. But wonderful show. If you haven't seen it, I recommend you go on my YouTube channel and go check it out, or go on to Nita and Zeta, AND, as opposed to the ampersand in between. The actual play is with an ampersand, but unfortunately, the internet won't allow you to do ampersands on domain names and things of that sort. So they had to use it that way. But yeah, she was wonderful. And of course, I know that that we were trying originally. I was actually trying to get involved with the production many months ago before it went to HowlRound. And I'm glad that we're able to do it, and I'm glad that I'm able to sort of piggyback onto what HowlRound's doing. They were very generous, and they said, yeah, if you want to broadcast at the same time and simulcast it, you can do that.
That's great.
We just have to have you give us the administrative rights to your page, which I gladly did, no problem. And so we're going to broadcast it, and then I'm going to actually have a watch party on our NOLA Theater Folk Facebook group, so you'll be able to see it live on theatercriticism.com. And then probably a second or so later, as it's on a watch party, you'll see it on NOLA Theater Folk Facebook group. So
that's great.
So we'll see that. And of course, I'm not really able to put it up on YouTube because, unless I get permission from them to get the broadcast, it's going to be archived on those two sites, but not on YouTube. I don't have permission to do on YouTube, and I don't really need it, on YouTube. But if they ever want me to house it again for them, I'm more than happy to do that. But we're sort of glad to do that. But sadly, they were trying to do it quickly back in April, May, June. They were trying because they found out that that obviously that Yvonne, who's the subject, if you will, there's an early picture of her when she's on the force, that she was not doing well, and that she had taken a turn for the worse medically. That there was a possibility that she was going to be going through a medical crisis, and so we tried our best to get involved. Matter of fact, around that same time, I was interviewing her daughter-in-law, Troy Bechet, of course, who's
Troy is wonderful. Yeah, Troy's been a really important part of this whole project.
And I mentioned to her that we were thinking of doing that, and she was so moved by that. And then, of course, unfortunately, sadly, within a few weeks of me having the interview with Troy and us trying to get that together, she took a terrible turn for the worse and sadly passed away. So again, we're sorry that she's not with us again, but she was at least there, back in 2018 to see this marvelous work. And I don't mean to make light of this, but since the whole thing has been going on, the Black Lives Matter group, I mean, more and more people, America, we see you. More and more people are bringing up a lot of questions about where theater should be going, and I'm trying to support all of those efforts, et cetera. But I'm going to ask a question, and it's going to be a difficult question to answer, Ariadne. But you are a very lovely playwright, but you are not of color.
That's right.
I wonder, moving forward today with theater, do you think you would have been given the same opportunity to do what you did with Black and Bue, moving forward from 2020, if this project were just coming to fruition today?
That's a question that I certainly think about a lot. And of course, I was very humbled and very, very, very honored to be chosen to write this play. And I think that with everyone on the team that we had, it just turned out so well. But I do think that in the future, whatever happens with this project, I think it's going to be important for me to sort of take a step back. The world is changing, and we're all so committed to making that happen. And I've actually been talking with Matt and with Lisa a little bit about what we can do with this project. After this reading, it was something that we thought was kind of over and done with in 2018 after the production, and now we have this amazing chance to sort of revive it at this really sort of dark but also really hopeful sort of moment of national reckoning. And so what I would like to do is move forward with this project and sort of bring in other stories of other Black women in policing, and maybe commission other playwrights or other artists to create works of art or to create works of theater based on these women of color in American history who have really done a lot of work to make policing better, right? And I think that as this project does go forward, my ultimate goal is to take a step back from it and say, I am so grateful that I was commissioned to write this play. I think it turned out really well. I think it was a wonderful team that we had, but I do think going forward, it would be time for me to take a back seat. Yeah.
Cheryl, any thoughts about that? Cheryl?
What you say? I can hear you.
Yeah, I'm saying, did you have any thoughts about what she just said?
Yes, I was listening. And you know what? I'm like I said, I wanted to be involved with this process, whether I was running a light, whether I was helping somebody change. I knew that this was going to be prevalent at some point, because this is one of those shows as well that has a mark in history where at any point you can pick it up and it'll still hold the same importance. It'll still bring the same awareness that hopefully opens up, like Ms. Ariadne said, to broader opportunities, to expand the story into more people of color, as well as mainly more women of color that have made a difference in history, that don't often get their stories told on this grand scale, where everybody can learn something and can relate to some part of the story and can just be grateful that, especially everybody that's a part of this project, grateful that we were actually able to meet. Like, I was able to meet and hug her and you know, she asked me if I was okay after the show. She was just just absolutely ecstatic, moved to tears. And Miss Yvonne is not, you know, anything. Yvonne doesn't do that type of thing. She got a little teary eyed and asked me, you did so well. And I just wanted to make sure that her story was told, that Ariadne's words were wanted it to come off the page, that Mr. Troy Poplar's direction would reflect to the audience the story that all three of these important people decided to come together and produce for a wide range of people that all need the story, no matter how old they are.
So again, tomorrow at 2 o'clock, 2 o'clock New Orleans time, we're gonna have an opportunity to see this piece. And again, those of you who have not seen it, you're going to be in for a treat. This is going to be again a piece that's going to be presented over HowlRoundCommons.com. HowlRound.com is a group that, as Ariadne had mentioned, does a lot of theater productions, and they're taking this project and running with it. You'll be able to see it on the NOLA Theater Folk Facebook group and the theatercriticism.com Facebook page first, because we're going to broadcast to that one. Unfortunately, the reason we have to have a watch party on NOLA Theater Folk Facebook group, I'll explain it, is that HowlRound does not broadcast to groups. They will broadcast to a page, but they won't broadcast to a group. So it becomes, you know, a matter of privacy. If you're in a group, you're entitled to a certain amount of privacy, which is one of the reasons that we ask everybody when they go on to StreamYard.com/Facebook to give permission. If somebody out there wants to ask a question of Ariadne or Cheryl before the night gets too long, you know, I'd love to hear from you. Again, we're able to post your comments either if you're on Facebook or YouTube. We should be able to get your comments and you know, allow people to answer any of your questions that you may have or entertain it at this time. Ariadne, tell me, you know, you'd mentioned a little bit about the process and how you got basically selected. You'd put out a bid, etc. When you first started working with Matthew, did he show you reams of paper that he had taken paper notes, or did he take these on tapes? Or
yeah, he had audio. He had audio that I listened to, and then I also conducted several interviews of my own with Yvonne, so I had a lot of material to work with.
And who was it that you wanted to follow up? Who was it that he had an initial conversation with? I think he talked to several of the people are listed in the program that I had, but it included Warren Woodfork. It included several other people, some of whom I know, some of whom I don't know. So were there any of these people, Jacqueline Davis or John Fields or Dana Franklin, any of these people who were mentioned on the back of this?
Sure, yeah.
Were
So
you followed up with or
absolutely. We reached out to a lot of folks. Obviously, not everyone has the time to talk to us. That's just how things go. But we had some really fascinating interviews. Jacqueline Davis, I spoke to. A lot of those people mentioned on the back of the playbill really were very generous with their time, you know. And I sat down with them. I asked them about their own experiences.
Was Jacqueline part of the force too?
She was, yeah. So she was around around the same time, basically, as Miss Yvonne.
I got you. So we're being told good job, but again, it's a Facebook user, so we have no idea who it is.
A mysterious fan.
Yes, it might be Carol Sutton for all I know. And if it is, you know, we don't know until you go to StreamYard.com/Facebook and put your name in there and let us get your.
Well, it'll just be a mystery.
So Jacqueline, I did have a picture that you had forwarded to me, and I wanted to put that up, of some of the early recruits for the New Orleans Police Department. And this is a historic picture, and Cherelle, you should probably take great pride in this as well. But these people are Yvonne is what sort of on the fourth over from the left, or second over from the right?
I believe she is all the way on the left.
Is she? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry. She is. Yvonne, yeah, she's very, very much so. Yeah.
Yeah. So I believe there were 5 women. There were 5 women in her rookie class. So I believe she was either the first or the second year of female cops in New Orleans.
Amazing.
Yeah. And they had to wear the little skirts. They had to wear the hats. They gave them these tiny little guns that they actually had to carry in their handbags, which makes it into the play. It's kind of a little
that looks like that's behind them at City Hall. Is that right?
It's sure. Yeah, I think that's exactly where it is.
Amazing. So, and it hasn't changed much.
No, City Hall certainly hasn't.
Yeah. And again, that's a historic picture. Cherelle, you know, having met Yvonne, she's such a sweet lady, but knowing what she endured, a lot of what Ariadne had to write down, you know, is in the play. But when you did talk to her, did she confide in you anything else that maybe gave you a little bit more information about how to inform your character, Van Broussard?
I did a lot of observing of her. She's not a woman of many words. At least she wasn't to me. There was an understanding. She reflected on a lot of the story that we already know. She did show me a lot of pictures that only, of course, she has. And her and Matt, and we all sat down and had dinner, and she just talked about how important the production was to her, how important Ms. Ariadne was to her in writing it and getting her story out. She was more passionate about that, but it was more watching like isms and silent wisdom and this power that emitted from Miss Yvonne without her having to open her mouth. She just look in your direction, and it was, you know, for me, complete rush of energy, and I didn't leave her side. Whenever I was around her, I just stayed as close to her as I could, just to hear anything she had to say, anything. And that had a huge effect on me, especially after the show. And that's what made me know that no matter which direction the production was going to go, I knew it was important to her, and seeing how important it was to her made it equally important to me that this story be told as much as possible.
So Ariadne, can you tell me a little bit, fill in the blanks a little bit about how, you know, a lady who starts off as a rookie cop back in, I think it was 1965. Is that right? When you had that?
68, 69.
68.
Yeah.
So late 60s, right on the cusp of the civil rights movement, etc.
Mm-hmm.
How in 1985 she rises to become the assistant superintendent or deputy chief. How is it that she was selected, and what were the qualifications to get that? First off, being a woman, but also, you know, being a woman of color, and
of course.
Well, she rose in that department. So what was it about her?
So she filled several roles within the department over the years. She was actually in narcotics for a while, which is in Act 1. Actually, Cherelle's character puts herself in disguise, which Yvonne actually did. She would put on disguises. You know, she would go on drug buys, trying to bust drug dealers. That was fairly short-lived. Actually, fairly early in her career, she made a transition into the community relations department, which is, I think, a huge part of her legacy. They did some really cool work here in New Orleans that was really focused on people, right? It was about fostering relationships between the cops and the people that they served. So, for example, in the projects, they would have these talent shows every year, where everybody in the projects would turn out, the whole neighborhood would come, and kids would sing and dance, and it was a big deal, and there were prizes, and that was something that was totally created by her department, the community relations department, which was a big success. And we get into this a bit in the play in Act 1. The community relations department was a pretty new thing in those days, and they were mostly staffing it with women, right? Because the men didn't want to do it. The men thought that it wasn't manly, it wasn't tough.
Right.
And so Yvonne was placed in that department and ended up really, really transforming things positively, working on building relationships with the community, basically techniques that today we might call community policing, right?
Well, and that's the thing, is that to me, the story with her is that yeah, she worked with the DEA, and yeah, she had done some of those drug buys, etc. But yeah, the story of her is that she was such a pivotal person in terms of community policing, and the intersection of, if you will, Black Lives Matter and Blue Lives Matter in terms of respecting police, and community policing, so that people will want to go to the police rather than fear them and have to fear them,
Right.
So,
and I think, today a paradigm shift has to happen. I think that policing needs to be transformed on a really, really fundamental level in order for things to work. There's just so much systemic racism, especially in law enforcement, in the laws themselves. Systemic racism is basically, baked into the fabric of our country. But I do believe that transformation can happen. And I think that if we look at what Yvonne was doing in the 70s, in the 80s with these community relations projects, it's not going to solve everything, but I think it can give departments around the country some ideas, right, as to how to maybe start making that shift, so that policing is seen as what it should be, which is a service for the community,
Right.
rather than a punitive function, against poor people and Black people.
On the side of every police car, it says to protect and to serve.
Right. And I think that was the motto that she lived by. I mean, that was her career, was protecting and serving.
Right.
And, we talk in the play about how she feels sometimes like she's between these two islands, right? She's between us and them. She's between the Black community and the Blue police department. And at the end of the play, one of my favorite lines in the play is when one of her proteges, who's a white cop, a young white cop, a woman, in the early 2000s, says, "You're not the water between the islands, you're the bridge." And I think that is what she was. And I think that so many Black women in police departments across the country serve that same exact function. And I really hope that we can carry this project forward and find other women like Yvonne and tell their stories, and create art around them and create theater around them, and really try to drive this paradigm shift that really, really needs to happen in American society today.
A couple of thoughts, and again, they have nothing necessarily to do with the play, but they have to do with the police. One of them is that we have found over the course of last several years that videos have been our conscience and our guide and our clarion call, if you will, that when we see a video that cannot be denied, a George Floyd video, or even Aubrey that we see, the people who are really taken advantage of. There's no way to deny that somebody is causing grievous damage to somebody when they're standing on their neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, or shooting them when they're just jogging through a neighborhood, things of that sort. So those videotapes are very important. As I say, they are the conscience, and they are the reason that people become activated and energetic, trying to fight the good fight against these overzealous and perhaps misdirected police officers. But again, that's on the one hand. I think that we need more and more of these body cameras to show that the good police officers are acting properly, and that those that are the bad seeds, if you will, are found out and prosecuted for the misdeeds. And I think that's very important, that moving forward, that nobody should ever desist from putting on a body cam, and that nobody should ever say, I don't want to do that, because why would they not want to do that? Why would they want to show that they are actually being part of the good
Absolutely.
program, as opposed to doing misdeeds. I wonder though, on the other hand, being somebody who was so zealously attached to the police department, I wonder how Yvonne would have felt about, and of course she lived through the latter part of the Black Lives Matter movement, with all the protesting, et cetera, and she was still with us when she passed. But the question is the whole question about defunding police, how she would have felt, about that. I think one of the questions is, do we want police departments that resemble military forces? And I think she probably would say no.
Yeah.
But by the same token, is that what defunding is? Is defunding the police to deal with demilitarizing the police, or is defunding going further than that? And so I don't know the answer to those questions, but I bring it out there because
Sure.
I thought maybe Cherelle or you would be able to make some comments about that. And, for me, it's not a question that I have to deal with on a regular basis, because I certainly am not a person of color, and I don't have to worry about, when I get stopped by police officers, to whether or not I'm going to be
right
in 10 minutes.
Well, I'm certainly no expert in this subject matter, but from what I learned, interviewing her and sort of studying the police, at least theoretically, and how the police function, as I was writing the play, I would think that Yvonne would support defunding the police. I think there's a lot of confusion around that term, right? And defunding the police doesn't mean getting rid of the police. Defunding the police means sort of revolutionizing the way police function, because police only spend something like 15 to 20% of their time actually dealing with crime. Most of what police officers are sent to deal with on a daily basis is things like people with mental health crises, people having domestic disputes, traffic accidents, things like that. And so much training in police departments is placed on, handling weapons. And I don't think Yvonne would have seen that as the ultimate goal of policing. I think when we talk about defunding the police, we're thinking about really revolutionizing the way police departments work by diversifying them, bringing in more mental health professionals, making it so that the person who responds to a 911 call is someone who is specialized to deal with whatever is going on in that moment, not necessarily someone with a gun. It doesn't have to be a cop with a gun coming to every call, And so Yvonne is no longer with us. And I would hope that I'm speaking for her accurately, but I think she would be totally on board with defunding the police and transforming the police. I think that's really the word that makes a lot more sense, transforming the police.
But she was a person who was for law and order. She definitely, respected the fact that people need to follow, if not the letter of the law, the spirit of the law.
Of course. But I think what we have to acknowledge is that a lot of these laws are racist. In the play, in the second act, we get into sort of what changed, right? What made it so that, the community policing methods that Yvonne was using in the 70s and 80s, what made it so that we can't use those anymore? And Carol Sutton's character says this in the second act of the play, is the war on drugs. Honestly, the Reagan administration's war on drugs criminalized poverty, basically. I mean, these laws are literally racist. There's much harsher punishment for crack cocaine, for instance, than for powder cocaine. Powder cocaine is considered more of a white drug, right?
Right.
And so it's really the laws themselves that need to be changed. And I think that you can be a cop, and you can support communities, and you can support order and health and happiness in communities, and still look at some of these laws and say, actually, these laws themselves need to change. It's not about good cops, bad cops. It's about the fact that cops are being asked to enforce laws that are unjust. And so it's not even just police departments changing. It's the whole system, I think, that needs to be reworked.
Cherelle, any follow up on what Ariadne had said? In other words,
yes, I do agree
as a
with
woman and also a woman of color. Yeah.
In relation to that, specifically with Patricia Green's character, when she almost loses her son due to a run-in on the police. There's a line particular to in that scene where the mother turns to the officer and says to hand in your gun. So I think, backing up what Ariadne said, it's less defunding and more of a reforming. Reforming first the idea that the other is perceived as a threat, and then deforming and reforming the idea that there's a certain mask that you have to put on in order to serve and protect, which is, number one. And like Ariadne said, it doesn't have to involve on every call a gun, or just running in with no warrant, no any kind of supportive factual means to be there. The whole idea of handing your gun is more so of on being perceived as a threat on both ends, both as police officers and as the people on the other side of the gun, or the people that is involved in the that have to dealt with instead of talk to, instead of rationalize, which was community relations, was about establishing a relationship between the public and police officers, where if a officer is approaching one, it's not threatening, or it's not, oh, I have to straighten up, or I have to be perceived to look weak or not like a threat, so I don't get shot, anything doesn't happen to me or anybody in the neighborhood, and then it instills a fear, so it's just getting to the root of that. And Miss Yvonne would have definitely agreed to the reforming of it, because it's baseline fear. She would have told that to me. It's fear on both sides, fear of completely overstepping, and then fear of the consequences and being perceived and looked at, especially as a Black person, as a threat every time you walk out of the house or you go for a jog, like you mentioned, Alan. All of those things, or just being in your home. So it's at now our are constantly being looked over, instead of there being like okay, we can actually handle the matters that need to involve force, need to involve those things. And Miss Yvonne and Broussard's character, which is based on Miss Yvonne, was very prevalent and very she stood her ground on that. It doesn't have to be forceful. Even on her first job with her partner, on the very first run they have, there was an argument between the two about whether or not force should have been used. And her argument, which was pretty much based on what Miss Yvonne believed in, shouldn't involve force. It should involve an understanding, and not just jumping to fear, and not jumping to a threat, or not jumping out of keep your gun cold, like she says. So I definitely agree.
Well, it was about 2 years after Yvonne retired from the force that we had Rodney King, and it was videotaped, and it created a lot of uproar, a lot of rioting, and here we are in 2020, and a lot of the same things are happening. I would say that maybe we've moved along a little bit further along, that the people who are now supporting, efforts to defund the police, or perhaps supporting Black Lives Matter, are doing their level best to really be more committed to it. But in some ways, I see we're repeating the same things, and not everything is happening as quickly as we'd like to. Sometimes change is not as fast as we'd like to. It's sometimes glacial in scope rather than fast. So hopefully Yvonne's memory will be honored with the play. And I know you had a couple other pictures that you wanted to show. This was one for the second act, I guess, with Anne Broussard's character.
This young actor, his name is Niles. He plays Anne Broussard's son in the first act, and in the second act, he plays this young man named Jacoby, who gets in trouble with the police and has sort of a really interesting relationship with that young woman, who in that production was played by Miley Zox. And so we really see her sort of attitude towards policing changing as she develops a relationship with this young man.
And then we had one other picture that this is, I guess, another picture. Is that Zeb?
This is, yeah, that's Zeb, and that's Cherelle in her narcotics disguise. I love this scene. It's one of my favorites. Yeah.
So that's
And
Cherelle.
he's actually a Black Panther, right? Because the Black Panthers had a lot going on in New Orleans at the same time, and so I tried to weave their story in as well.
Okay, so it's tomorrow.
Yes, and can I say
reading? Yes.
can I say one more thing before we get off of here, Alan?
Sure.
So we have the reading tomorrow, which we're so excited about. And actually 2 days afterward on Monday at the same time, so 2:00 Central, we have a panel. We're calling the panel Black and Bue 2020 Art, Activism, Transformation. So the goal is to really take this play and figure out how we can use it as a tool for social change. So we have this panel in which we'll be discussing the play. We have a lot of really exciting guests. Susan Hudson is going to be there. She works for the New Orleans Independent Police Monitor. She's been a wonderful resource as we've written this play. Stephanie McKee from Junebug Productions is moderating. Kylie Polfus is going to be on the panel as well. Some other really exciting people. So we'll be talking about the play. We'll be talking about theater as activism, and we'll be talking about policing and how Yvonne's story can help us transform that realm.
Well, again, I want to thank you for being with us again tonight. Ariadne Blayde, the playwright, thank you for being here. We're going to ask you just to stick around a little bit while I say goodnight to everybody. And again, if anybody wants to follow up, I'm going to give that information about the play tomorrow. And again, Cherelle Palmer, thank you for being here as well. It's been a delight to have you and have you comment about this play that you have taken to heart and have been so much a part of since 2018. Thank you for being with us tonight again on NOLA Theater Talk. My name is Alan Smason again, and I want to thank you all for being here. One more time, tomorrow at 2:00, we're going to have Black and Bue. Again, that is the play that you're going to see. And again, it's a live stream reading, as you can see, at 2:00. You'll see it on our theatercriticism.com Facebook page, and it'll also be streamed to with a Facebook watch party to the NOLA Theater Folk Facebook group, so you'll be able to see it on those two. And again, we hope that you'll check that out tomorrow. It's really an important event, and I want to thank everybody for being here. I want to thank Lisa Damore for shepherding this project, Matthew Schwartzman for getting the project off the ground to begin with, and of course being in the background for this project, and all those people who were involved, to please honor them with all the work that they're doing by watching this tomorrow at 2:00. And again, for NOLA Theater Talk, it's Alan Smason, and I say I'll see you at the theater.